Hello, beautiful people. This is Cherie Burton, the host of Women Seeking Wholeness podcast. This is a podcast for women who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. You know, talking a lot about unveiling the true you, unearthing your soul, bringing to the surface your authentic being. This is my favorite thing in the whole world to talk about. And our guest today is an amazing expert who's done some science around the wounds we carry as women, particularly one that has to do with the patriarchy. This isn't a big bad feminist episode. It's reality. And feminist isn't a bad word to me anymore, by the way. I claimed it a long time ago because all it is just seeing the feminine and honoring the feminine, both in men and in women, and in giving equal amounts of power and voice to both genders. I met Dr. Valerie Rein in Phoenix, and we connected at a women's conference. I knew when I heard her talk about patriarchy stress disorder that there was something powerful there. And she's sort of the foremost pioneering researcher and expert in this domain with respect to collective unconscious and epigenetics and how unprocessed trauma affects us, not just what we've personally walked through, but as a species, as a subset of humanity. It's fascinating to me that we can experience so many deleterious consequences without even knowing why. And that some of the wounds we carry and some of the trauma we carry is not just our own. We're all one. And so we're all in this together. So when one person heals, it brings everyone else that much closer to their own healing. Dr. Valerie Rein holds a master's in psychological counseling from Columbia University and a PhD in psychology from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. You're in for a treat. Now, before we get to Dr. Valerie and this fascinating discussion, I want to remind you that Stand, Speak, Shine School is still taking applicants. We are actually launching January 30th, and this will be an ongoing program, probably every 6 months or so. But this first round is my kind of beta launch group, and so I'm giving it at almost half price. And so just know that if you're in this first group with us, you're going to get the beta version, which will also be no less powerful, I want to say. Just knowing the women that are already on board, I'm just so excited because they are incredible ladies. Go to standspeakshine.com or to cherieburton.com to find out more about that. Also, I would just urge you to share this podcast with your girlfriends. Know that on the Women Seeking Wholeness podcast Facebook group and page, so I have a page and a group. The group's a little more intimate because I go live every week and do a teaching, and then we get to do some Q&A, and it's a little bit more interactive than just this podcast where you're only hearing me speak. I want to hear from you this year. We're heading into a new decade. We're heading into a new era of the feminine. A lot of us have passed through some major stuff within the last 2 decades, especially within the last 5 years. There's been a lot of stuff happening on the earth energetically. So let's align together. Let's explore together. And let's continue to have these deeper discussions. Some of them might be a little bit more controversial. And I would put today's episode a little bit in that category because it is not for the faint of heart or soul. Patriarchy Stress Disorder. Let's bring on Dr. Valerie. Dr. Valerie, I am so excited for this discussion. It just literally the topic, where we're going to go with this and just everything that you're about is just so intriguing to me. I didn't realize, I know you coined the term PSD, correct?
Yes.
Patriarchy stress disorder. So I totally want to get into what that is. But first, I always like to start my discussions with why this is relevant for you, why this is personal, what led you to this space. And usually it has to do with some kind of life experience, a marked life experience that led you into this field or this work. Can you share with us a little about your personal journey?
Yes. You know it, Cherie. And thank you so much for having me today. It's a joy to be here and share with you and your listeners. Yeah, my personal journey began with being on the phone with a client one day and feeling the left side of my body go weak and numb. And from there, I ended up in the ER with symptoms of a stroke. And Thankfully, after a lot of tests, they determined it was not a stroke. My diagnosis was, quote unquote, just stress. Just stress, which was really, really surprising for me because I didn't feel stressed. And that was the wake up moment for me to start realizing, well, how come? How come I had such high stress levels and I didn't even know it? And what the ER episode did was it lifted up that blanket of workaholism, that security blanket of workaholism that I had been covering up with for a long time. And that's how stress became my normal, became my addiction, if you will. And underneath that security blanket was a lot of disturbing stuff, such as, my life looked really good on the outside looking in. I checked off all the boxes the society told me I needed to feel happy and fulfilled. I had 2 graduate degrees in psychology. I had a thriving practice. I had a family and home I adored. But the truth was that I still didn't feel happy and fulfilled. And it was a very painful realization. And it led me to wonder how come the clients I was serving were healing from this numbness, this and anxiety and depression, stepping into the fullness of their lives. And I started to wonder what I was doing for them that I wasn't doing for myself. And the answer was, with all of my clients, I used mind-body trauma healing tools. And the important thing here is that most of them, if not all of them, didn't recall any traumatic experiences. However, they all showed this symptom of trauma, the telltale symptom of trauma. And this is for our listeners to kind of demystify this whole thing. The symptom of trauma is we get disconnected from parts of ourselves, from the fullness of our self-expression, from the fullness of the range of emotion that we can feel, and from parts of our body as well. So all of my clients were showing some degree of disconnection, and they were responding to trauma healing really, really well. Their lives were transforming. But I wasn't doing it for myself because, ironically, I didn't think I had any trauma. And that led me to wonder, what kind of trauma could I have and could all my clients have without realizing it? And at the time, the research was coming out showing that traumatic experiences are genetically transmitted. And that was my light bulb moment when the dots connected. Women have been oppressed for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. Oppression is traumatic. Trauma is genetically transmitted. So we are born with the trauma of oppression imprinted in our DNA and in our nervous system. It's driving our nervous systems into overdrive, into constant stress, and we don't even know it. We don't even know it. And so it became a very personal mission for me to spread this message, because until we know that, until we see PSD, we are stuck thinking that something's wrong with us, that we are somehow failing, we are somehow, basically we need fixing. And right. My core message is that there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with us, but there is something that we inherited. And when we recognize that, we can heal it.
Yeah, I've heard that there is just this collective sadness. And I know because of your background in psychology, you're very probably familiar with Carl Jung and the collective unconscious. And I'm just a huge Carl Jung fan. And were I to go on and get my master's and PhD, it would be in depth psychology with the Jungian archetype emphasis, just because I am so fascinated with how these beliefs and all this trauma, as you mentioned, through epigenetics and whatnot, transfer into the collective psyche and then filter through individuals who have kind of their own mission to heal it. I think it can show up very concentrated in a soul who has a mission to be a voice to heal it, especially in the realm of the patriarchy imbalance.
Yeah.
So I would love to explore that a little bit more with you, but I'm really curious, how do you see religion being, because this is something, because we talk a lot about spirituality on my podcast, we talk a lot about God, we talk a lot about the divine feminine, and it feels like the divine feminine has just been suppressed, unacknowledged.
Yeah.
And however anyone defines that, it's completely, it's a subjective thing in a lot of ways. But how do you see religion and the patriarchy? How do you see the damage playing out in all women in terms of this PSD?
Oh my. Yeah, this is so big, Cherie. I actually haven't been asked this before. So let's see where we can go with this. I want to start with the human, very, very innate to humans drive to search for meaning, search for greater, the greater plan, right? For connection with something outside ourselves. It is in all of us. And our society is set up in this way that the first point of explanation that we encounter is through religion. Yeah. Like we're searching for the greater meaning. Oh, here's religion for you. We have it all figured out and it's explained in this big book. And every big book in our culture has been written by patriarchy, where women have been written out of the books. Women's spirituality, women's participation, it's so painful, and even of course in the all major religions, in the Judaic, Christian, and Muslim traditions, God is a masculine presence, right? God and everything.
The Holy Trinity, the whole Holy Trinity is masculine.
Yeah. And just the damage that this does to the psyche of a girl, a woman, is enormous, because she gets the message that I don't belong. For me to get close to God, I have to basically appeal to this man, to the masculine. There is no God in the feminine expression. No God as a feminine archetype in our culture. There's this beautiful author. I interviewed her on my podcast, where actually, this interview is coming out soon. Trista Hendren is her name, and she wrote a series of books called The Girl God. Girl God. And so I have a 9-year-old daughter. We just love these books so much. In them, she so elegantly walks through the story and she undoes the damage through this beautiful narrative of how patriarchy basically hijacked this religion and spirituality. And it's written for children, and it's beautifully illustrated. And it was just so healing for me and my daughter to go through these stories and start reclaiming our relationship with the divine, and understanding, just like with PSD, seeing the invisible allows us to do the impossible. When we see invisible trauma, then we can heal it. We understand there's nothing wrong with us. With the religious conditioning and the damage that the patriarchal hijack of spirituality has done, when we see it again, we can heal it.
Yeah, we have to. I have always believed that healing starts with seeing and listening, but I love what you're saying. And it's an interesting phrase that the patriarchy hijacked spirituality, because I cannot tell you how many women, and I include myself in this, I was born into a really high demand religion in terms of obeying priesthood authority. And from the time of my girlhood, I would have craved to have the Girl God book series. But from the time of my girlhood, I always wondered why we didn't have a developed deity that was feminine. I just figured that women were somewhere on the other side of the veil, somewhere in heaven, just kind of taking a second seat. And, like you said, the main scriptural text we have that everybody adheres to in Christianity is the Bible. And there's different versions of the Bible, but King James Version is the one that I've always grown up learning from. And aside from maybe Queen Esther and just a handful of other women, there's no real leadership with women. There's no real vocal authority. There's no, there's some beautiful stories, don't get me wrong, Sarah and Hannah and Elizabeth and Mary, and but it's all based around motherhood. And no one loves their kids more than me. And I always tell people this. I have 6 kids. No one loves their kids more than me. But my motherhood does not define my spirituality or my walk as a woman on this earth. And so that's kind of how I was raised. I was raised to see she's a heavenly mother, and that's it. Motherhood is my only thing that I have to look forward to in the afterlife. It's my highest calling. So other than that, there's no real developed theology or doctrine around this female deity. And it was a massive pain point for me. I mean, I've been searching for it my entire life. I'm 50. I've been on pilgrimage. I finally gave myself permission because it wasn't coming down from the patriarchy.
Good for you.
It's not a priority for them to develop this doctrine because it keeps them in power. It threatens the establishment. It threatens the ways of doing the traditions of the fathers, if you will. And that phrase, traditions of the fathers, is patriarchy. It's not a positive term.
Unfortunately, because it also unfortunately, because it messes up our relationships in our lineage because of this power imbalance. I would love to only have the positive, loving, nurturing associations with all fathers, right? And unfortunately, through this religious connotation, it becomes something that's hostile to the feminine. And there's so much trauma that happens for women through religion. I actually grew up, that's an interesting nugget about how I grew up. I grew up in the Soviet Union where religion was outlawed. There was no religion. So I did not get exposure to religion at all growing up. So it came in later when I was in my teenage years, and the changes were happening in the country where I grew up, where the Iron Curtain lifted and we could have whatever religion we wanted. And that was my first exposure, but I didn't get that early indoctrination, which is interesting.
That might be a good thing. I've interviewed a couple of other thought leaders and spiritual teachers who had no religious upbringing, and they don't have the same blocks with shame and other aspects to their femininity or to spiritual seeking because they didn't get the early indoctrination. And it was just like a green light,
Yeah, I'm grateful for that, but also there was this gaping hole, right? It's
sure.
It's this duality. And speaking of trauma, because that my work revolves around helping people uncover and heal trauma. There is so much religious trauma that as we heal it, and again, it starts with recognizing it, we can remove these blocks. We can really help that journey that you were describing unfurl with ease and grace. And again, whatever blocks we're running into, it's not our fault. It's not our fault. They're not of our making. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And sometimes it can be tricky to differentiate, what am I carrying through the collective unconscious of all women versus what's just through my family lines or this. I have an interesting story about that. My listeners know that I really struggle with this patriarchal religious type stuff. And one of the biggest pain points in my religion of origin, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or Mormon, is that polygamy was instituted from the beginning, pretty much.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so that was always something I could never. And I've said this before, but it felt like somebody hit. I was 9 years old when I first heard about it, and it felt like somebody punched me in the stomach. I didn't know what to, like, energetically,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And as I've kind of deconstructed it and looked at the real history, and it's just like, no, I just don't believe this was ever of God. I really don't. And that's a bold statement to make. But when you're told that this is the way it is because God said so, and it's, several women to one man, what that does to the psyche of a girl who wants to be full of faith, who wants to experience all of the blessings that eternity has to offer, if you will, that doesn't sound like a really great heaven to me. And again, tied right into, the worth of one man equals 10 women kind of thing. That's kind of the messaging that gets delivered subconsciously, I think, in some ways when there's that on the table. But with respect to polygamy and me just saying, no, I reject that. Like, I don't have to accept that. That's not part of my personal sovereign set of beliefs. And once I gave myself that go ahead, and I really felt the divine feminine coming in strong, kind of that like mad, tempestuous, don't mess with me, volcano, earthquake feminine. It's like, no, this is damaging.
Beautiful.
This damages women. So I just wanted to add that piece in there because that was my early exposure to how do women fit into heaven? What is my role eternally? It was always, I'm going to have to be kind of in this little group of other women / mothers who all we're doing is populating and we have this to share with this one man and whatever. So, do you think that every woman experiences this PSD? Patriarchy Stress Disorder?
Yes. Patriarchy has been around for thousands of years, 10 to 12,000 estimated. And every generation has been traumatized by it. And trauma is transmitted generation to generation to generation. So I don't see how any woman could have escaped it. And here's the thing, right? I can understand when a woman hearing this goes into rejecting it, and it's totally fine because it may feel like, oh, am I being made a victim? Is this victim mentality to think that we have trauma? And I just want to comment that it is really actually empowering to know what's going on, that there is nothing wrong with you. You're not failing, but there is something that you now have power to see and you have power to heal. And it's just like, imagine that if you had flu symptoms, right? But you didn't know that it was the flu. You just didn't know. There was no name for it. And you could think you were dying. You could go to the ER. You could get drugs for something that was completely different. But if you know it's the flu, you're like, okay, it's the flu. Here's what I got to do, and I'm going to get better. So that's how I think about PSD also. We need to see it. We need to name it. And what's going on in the world right now, yes, we have PSD, but we're getting drugs for a lot of things that stem from PSD. Anxiety is rooted in unprocessed trauma. Depression is rooted in unprocessed trauma. Addiction is most certainly rooted in trauma. It's a way to cope with pain. And there is so much ease, dissatisfaction. There is so much burnout going on for women. And so many health conditions are related to stress.
Yeah.
Even by very conservative estimates, 90% of health conditions are related to stress. And if we have unprocessed trauma in our nervous system, it keeps driving it into overdrive, into hypervigilance. So it's constant stress that we're living with, just like I did and didn't even know it. So we're living with it. We don't know it. So this is how I see that really the service of this message and this book is to lift the veil. Okay. You don't need to accept it. Not asking for that, but get the information, get the science, get the argument, and try it on for size and see if it fits. And if it does, then there is a system for healing it.
Yeah, I would love to climb into kind of the symptoms of PSD. I keep wanting to say PTSD. In a way, it is PTSD, but PSD, how it's unique. Because I will tell you one experience I had, and the reason I even brought polygamy up to begin with is we were talking about how it can live in your psyche and it's really not yours. So I kept wondering, why does this bother me so much? Why is polygamy bothering me? Isn't everyone else bothered by this? And there were times I would cry and sob and pray and seek and read scriptures and fast and go to the house of worship, go to the temple, ask, many decades running. Finally, when I really immersed myself in divine feminine, because I wasn't finding it in my own religion, I had this experience where I was laying in my bed one night, and this was probably when I was in my mid-30s. I had young children, and I just started thinking about polygamy and how it didn't fit, no matter what I read, no matter what I studied, in fact, it just got worse. And this is before I even really did a deep dive into it, which I did very recently. But at that time, it was a spiritual pain point. And I remember laying in my bed, sobbing, guttural sobs. And I knew it wasn't just because of me. It wasn't just because I didn't understand polygamy. I was feeling my ancestral pain. I was feeling all of these women that were kind of forced or spiritually coerced in abusive ways into this practice that did not heal it in their lifetime. In fact, it's still alive and well as a doctrine in the church that no one's really discussing, except for these millennials are like, I'm sorry, but no. So anyway, a lot of millennials are just rejecting these things. But for me, I didn't dare reject it because that would mean I didn't have enough faith. And so I was just guttural, gut-wrenching, and I was having these flashes. I wouldn't say necessarily, I just kept seeing like pioneer skirts and the heavy sorrow, the fear that they were experiencing, the coercion. And I just thought, wow, I don't know what just happened, but I have got to find a way to speak out about this. And that was 15 years ago. And I am just now, after everything I've read and pulled together on this going, this really wasn't okay. And it doesn't mean that I lack faith because I don't accept it and I just have to get past it and be nice and quiet about it. It's not okay. So I'm sure that was a PSD moment. But let me ask you, what are the
good
signs?
For you.
Yeah. What is that a typical? Only because I think I experienced that just because I have a pathway to, I have a voice, a platform and a pathway to write and speak about it. I know that may not be it may not bother other people as much as it bothers me, but I now know that it's part of my mission to give voice to those women who literally could not. They were afraid for their eternal salvation if they didn't practice polygamy.
Yeah. Oh, this is so big. And thank you for stepping into the current of what feels like your mission and your message and your work in the world. It takes a lot of courage and takes a lot of inner work to get to that place. So This is really big, Cherie. And to your question on what that moment was, how I would describe it, I describe a PSD as the invisible in the prison. PSD and any kind of trauma, actually, because it's invisible and it's inner and it imprisons us. And those moments, like the one you are describing, I talk about them as jailbreak moments. That moment when you start seeing, wow, like seeing through the walls, seeing that the walls are made of traumatic experiences, and there is collective, there is ancestral trauma, which you were connecting with. And then there is personal trauma. And in the book and in the programs that I teach, I describe a 5-step system for working through these layers of trauma, unpacking them, recognizing the impact that they're having. And there's another aspect that speaks to your mission. Part of my training, I bring together a lot of traditions in how I work, a lot of mind, body, spirit traditions. And a lot of them have now scientific validation, and I keep on refining the tools. And I'm my own patient zero in that. Always test everything in the lab. And one of the core traditions that I draw from is yoga. And in the yogic tradition, healing is seen as when we heal ourselves, we heal 7 generations before us and 7 generations after us. And this really resonates with me. Yeah, it just adds the meaning to what we're doing, because what we're doing is so courageous, uncovering layers and layers of lies, of coercion, of patriarchy, having us buy into this falsity. And the primary wound of patriarchy against women is that a woman is worth less than a man, right?
Yeah.
And how deeply that ingrained in our psyches, and how it's driving everything. It's driving our war on our own bodies, right? Looking into the mirror. Like, I don't know any woman who looks into the mirror and doesn't have a moment of self-hate, self-judgment right there and then. And it's not ours. That's the thing. It's not ours. Nothing's wrong with us. But the lies of patriarchy, that something is wrong with us, that we're not worthy, and all the parameters. So it takes a lot of courage to start seeing it, recognizing it, and then stepping into the healing current.
A lot of people talk about, the surges of anxiety and depression. I think it goes right along with what you're saying, because part of my other specialty, what I focus my career on, I also have a background in psychology, is basically how this generation is kind of the cleanup crew with emotional trauma that's been passed down through the ages. And that's why anxiety is at its all-time peak, because these souls who've incarnated into these bodies now, these children coming through, these teens, young adults, and even ourselves, of course, because we're the ones who are raising them and we're equipped to see what's really going on, is that they are holding in their bodies and in their cellular trauma, in their cellular constructs, this trauma. And I think it metastasizes in some souls more than others, because they're here to show us what's really wrong. For instance, the surgence of autism, it's at like a 1,500% increase than it was 25 years ago. It's all of these things happening that are collecting into our children and teens and young adults, where they're saying, excuse me, they're saying, hello, it's a sign we have to do it differently. There's the old ways, old traditions, which have largely been put in place, these systems, by men. the feminine arts, the healing arts, the intuitive gifts of women, the ways women have this incredible wisdom, the embodiment, all of this flow that femininity can offer into the healing space has been cast aside as unscientific, foo-foo, out there, weird. And those of us who are into holistic arts, like I can kind of consider myself a holistic psychologist, because I have seen how this has largely been denied, rejected. This whole spiritual, feminine, holistic, warm, intuitive, inclusive, expansive energy is not being put into our systems, including religion and governments and academia.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, when you discovered this patriarchy stress disorder, what was your light bulb moment? Like, why do you feel this is just, I mean, we've been talking, giving a lot of context around it, but for this time, why do you think this discovery is just so important right now? Do you think we're kind of at a crucial time? I mean, this is what I'm hearing from a lot of people, so I'll just kind of reflect. I'll halfway answer it for you.
Yeah.
But don't you think this is like a critical time? Don't you think we're at a critical time on the earth right now for all of this to be healed or to be looked at or examined, as you say?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I agree with you, Cherie. I also take the holistic view to the best of my ability, and consider the spiritual picture and also the science-based picture, and also as many layers as I can consider.
Sure,
right?
Which is awesome.
And yeah, thank you. So what's going on now is a lot of women are now stepping into their power, and that's incredible. For the first time in countless, just thousands of years, we finally have the opportunity to have a seat at the table, to play big. We have more women in politics than ever before. We have more people in decision-making positions. We have more women entrepreneurs with platforms than ever before. That is amazing. And what is also happening is because women are playing in all these areas where historically that was a punishable offense for a woman. Power has always been a punishable offense under patriarchy, right?
Yes.
We all know what happened to women who spoke up, and now we're speaking up. And our nervous system, because it carries that intergenerational trauma, it interprets what we're doing as dangerous. And there are two ways the nervous system keeps us safe: either going into freeze or fight or flight. Going into freeze looks like, I really want to do that, but oh, hey, I need to make a pediatrician's appointment for my child for next year's checkup, or like I need to do some research, I'm not ready, et cetera, things that are holding us back, right? I call those prison guards. Thoughts like, who's going to listen to me? Who's going to want to listen to me? I don't have anything important to say. The inner critic, the imposter syndrome, the upper limit problem, all of these are prison guards. All of these is the nervous system going into freeze and generating those behaviors and thoughts to keep us from stepping into our power. So that's one way. The other way, right? The other way is the nervous system going into fight or flight. So we are stepping into our power. We are playing big. And what happens is pretty much along the lines of what happened to me, ending up in the ER. There are so many stories like this. Women burning out, adrenal fatigue, thyroid issues, issues with sleep, just being unable to relax, to sleep restoratively, not being able even to stop without a glass of wine or a pill. And the burnout among women, high achieving women, has become pandemic, just pandemic.
Right.
And that is why I think this is very timely, very important, is because now we have the opportunity. Now we have the opportunity, but we need to upgrade our nervous system and bring it into current time. Because what trauma is a time machine. And it brings us back, like it makes us act as if it was still actually dangerous, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But in order for us to sink in with current time opportunity, we need to upgrade our biology. And that's why I bring in these mind, body, spirit tools, which I describe in the book. And there are starter tools on my website, drvalerie.com, which you can check out right now and start exploring. But I feel that we need to do much better. This is the new frontier of women's empowerment, in my view. It's not enough to just give women the opportunity. Yeah, not enough to give women the opportunity. It's like sometimes I say they used to burn us at the stake, and now they've handed us the torches.
Awesome. Well, I think we all have women within our lineages. If you're a healer of any kind or any type, we may not be being physically burned, but I can tell you that in certain circles, there is still this whole thing happening. It's like, you are a heretic. What are you talking about? Who gave you that authority?
Yeah.
This healing modality that you're doing is not approved, whatever. I mean, I see it happening. I see these witch hunts happening all the time.
Witch hunts are happening. Sometimes they're subtle and sometimes they're very overt. And we can, there's a lot of evidence, even in how media covers everything that's going on. There's such a bias toward covering men versus women. And we can, if our listeners are interested, just Google it and see for yourself. This is not the point of the conversation. But the point coming off what you're saying, that it's still going on, is that we are getting triggered. That old trauma, it keeps getting triggered all the time. Our nervous system keeps getting the message, it is still unsafe. What are you doing?
Yes. Yeah. It's like,
and then we're having the reactions that we're having.
Yeah. And I think it does also spark this indignant, I'll show you, for a lot of women I know, they're feeling both. They're feeling like they're getting their trauma triggered, but at the same time, they're getting an activation from another source within them, their divine DNA, saying, you are a pioneer. You are a revolutionary. You are meant to speak out. You are a change maker. And so, I've always felt that those who have a mission to speak out, or to, maybe they're not doing a podcast, or maybe they're not a speaker or writer or anything like that, but maybe they're just supposed to impact their spheres of influence and wake up the consciousness. What you're saying is we have to even awaken and name what's happening and see it before it can change. And a lot of people are asleep. They're literally asleep. I mean, it's not going to be very much longer that people can stay asleep to this, because it is kind of in its revolutionary early stages right now. But at some point it's going to break open, and then people that were, asleep will go, oh my gosh, where have I been? I've been living under a rock. This has been a problem for me my whole life. So how do we heal from PSD? How do we do that? You said you have a 5-step, and that's on Dr. Valerie. If they want to get started on a healing journey, where do they start? Our people.
Yes. And thank you, our listeners. And I also want to say that this work is not only for women. I focus on women specifically because women are the largest historically oppressed group. And it came through, this download of PSD came through as something very important to share with us, so we can see the invisible, so we can do the impossible. to heal and claim the fullness of our lives. But everybody has trauma. If you're a human, you have trauma, which I define as any experience that made us feel unsafe, physically or emotionally. And we've all had a lot of those experiences. And the mark of trauma, okay, so not every experience that makes us feel unsafe is traumatic, but traumatic experiences leave a mark of creating coping mechanisms that keep us safe going forward. The ones that I refer to as prison guards, those thoughts, those sensations in the body, and those behaviors that are not letting us fully live our full lives, that create that disconnection from parts of ourselves, from our fullness. And having said that, everybody has had those. Everybody has had those experiences. And I'm working on mine layer by layer by layer. The work continues. So the work doesn't end. I'm going to talk about starting it, but I just want to outline the trajectory that with each layer of trauma that you heal, you get amazing benefits. You increase your capacity to be present in your life, to experience joy, pleasure, intimacy, connection, sexuality begins to unfurl. Your voice in the world begins to unfurl, has positive effects in the wealth, money domains, and the health domain, every domain, right? And it also creates capacity to go deeper and heal another layer of trauma. So starting with the book is a fine place to start, because I outline the 5-step system and I provide exercises. And if you find that you might need more support, it's available too. And I talk about the options of having support. Of course, we have our own programs, and at drvalerie.com, you can basically there's a button. There is a button that lets you raise your hand and say, please let me know when the new round of the program becomes available. We have a virtual program. We have a live event. We have retreats. My big vision is so that people can connect with a community that does this countercultural healing work, because patriarchy doesn't sleep. It doesn't rest. This culture is patriarchal. It is not going to affirm you. It is not going to affirm your healing. It is not going to validate you or support you on this healing journey. It is going to do the opposite. It's going to keep on invalidating and triggering you. So anchoring in the community that is doing and speaking about things that are countercultural, that are things that have to do with reclaiming our authentic nature, healing, right?
I think women learn best through community. We're very relational, and we're more connected to our outer environment actually than men are, because we can hold space like that and intuit what's happening around us. And we're very connected to keeping it real and peaceful. So I agree. I have always been a proponent of women kind of validating each other and being, and that's what the online space has done to open up the feminine, honestly, all over the world.
Yes.
Where are you based out of?
Oh, it has been amazing. I'm based out of Tucson, Arizona. And we have beautiful weather here most of the year. Summer is an acquired taste. It gets hot. We don't hold our retreats in the summer here, but the rest of the year we're in this beautiful healing desert, surrounded by the mountains. We're in the caldera of an ancient prehistoric volcano. So there's this feminine energy of creation, disruption, and so this is where the magic happens. And it also happens online in the virtual communities. And for those who are impatient, I am, you can just shoot me an email and say, hey, Dr. Valerie, I heard you on Cherie's podcast, and I'm wondering what do you have going on right now? How can I get into this work? And I'll tell you about the options. We have a group going right now that you can join. And we can just hop on the phone and I'll share with you. And we'll just have a human conversation.
Yeah, great.
And I can be reached at Valerie at drvalerie.com.
Well, and I met you in Arizona actually at Allie Brown's event, and that's how we got into each other's space. And that was an incredible event of women thought leaders. And just, I'm still kind of processing a lot of what we received there. But women like you who are just out there, truly, I think what you said was right exactly up my alley. It just kind of connected some dots for me that you said the new frontier in women's empowerment is healing emotional trauma. I could not agree more with that. That is how we are going to stay connected, is through community, through validating, through going against the culture, like you said, creating a counterculture movement. We have to do this. And these little uprisings, I see them all over the place, and it just makes me smile. So thank you for the work you're doing in the world. And definitely, I would love to get my hands on your book when it's ready to roll, because it would be fun to just dive deep.
Yeah, she's out in the world. Yes, the book is available on Amazon right now. And and yes, it is. And or I like to call her she. So she is definitely feminine creation and a co-birthing. I've had conversations with hundreds of women while working on this book. And if you go to drvalerie.com, you'll find a link to the Amazon place where you can check out the book. And also, if you just want to dip your toe in, you can also download the first chapter. Or let's say you order the book, but you're waiting for the book, but you want to dive right in because you're feeling impatient and ready. So the first chapter, you can download it for free off that page as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for exploring this topic. I just have really been fed through and validated, honestly, through a lot of what you've said. And I know there are just scores of women who are feeling this wound, this feminine wound from not being honored and not being heard and being silenced for so many generations. So I would love to, I would love to have another conversation, maybe in 6 months or something, when we could go even deeper into this and just really parse out, maybe even, parsing out just how, because, you're going to attract a lot more people into your space now that your book, with what you're doing, and so will I. And so it'd be fun to revisit and parse out just kind of what we've learned things are speeding up. Time is speeding up. What can happen in 6 months would have taken years and years, even a generation. That's how fast the consciousness is shifting. So it would really be fun to a half year from now, kind of climb back into this and see what more we've learned and what more we've attracted to ourselves and gathered information wise. I love your connection with science, and also your emphasis, your big, all of the transpersonal psychology that you've really been versed in, I think lends itself to you having a really strong niche in this trauma stuff as it relates to femininity. So, and I personally am fascinated by the exact same thing. So it's just, we're just taking different trajectories with it, but just by you naming it and giving it a name, Patriarchy Stress Disorder, that has power. That will be very, very powerful for a lot of us.
Thank you for that. I'm very grateful for this download and for being the messenger of this. I see it as really the first wave of a movement. I vision many, many women becoming messengers of this, of PSD and of healing, and spreading this all over, because we're all influencers. You talked about this earlier, right? How we influence other people in our immediate environment. We influence our own lives. We influence our families. So for everybody listening, just recognize that you are an influencer. You are always creating, either consciously or unconsciously. So if you feel inspired by our conversation, right? If you check out the book and it resonates with you, consider sharing with your friends, consider starting a book club, consider creating your own community around you who can support you right there and then. And of course, stay connected, reach out. I really envision this network of connected women now that we have the internet, supporting each other from all over the world.
Yes, absolutely. Well, definitely you and I will stay connected, and it would be fascinating to go more in depth in your writing and see even more what your theories are around this and your 5 steps. I think that would be very fascinating in comparison also to some of my work around the same thing. I don't have the advanced degrees. I've just been in the trenches with this. And I've literally, I've literally spent 25 years of intense searching for healing emotional trauma and depression and anxiety. One other thing I want to add that's just a side note that you don't know about me, that a lot of my listeners do, is I actually, of the 7 children in my family that I grew up in, all of them were diagnosed bipolar except myself and one other sibling. And I actually lost a sister to suicide, a mother of 5. And so that happened about almost 15 years ago. And that has really, I have been formulating, and this could be something maybe we discuss together at a different date, but I've been formulating my own thesis on how religions wound women. I'm not necessarily saying that that was the cause of my sister's demise. There were a lot of biological factors, but culturally and spiritually, I can see that the wounding that has come into women through religious programming. And while I really think it's sacred and I honor it, and there's some holy aspects to it, you had better believe there are some pieces there that all women, I don't care if women go to church or not, it's there religiously. It's there about God. It's there about spirit. And we don't have a developed theology of female deity. And so it can be very, 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 very damaging to women in church, within religions. But anyway, the reason I brought my sister up is, she sort of was this walking generation, was just this walking embodiment of many generations of her disease that manifested so strongly in one person. I mean, she was born with 5 holes in her heart. She was born with severe scoliosis, and she developed a very severe mental illness. And so she was just this walking wound, really. And she had an incredible life, really just incredible, born with perfect pitch. She played several musical instruments by ear. She was an amazing alto voice, very, very gifted, but carrying a lot in her body, just born with all these wounds. So I have found that fascinating, that it can, and it kind of lends itself to what I was referring to earlier when I said that some souls, just through their own bodies, maybe they're not out there speaking or teaching or whatever, but just through what they walk through their inheritance in their body, is a massive teacher for other people to awaken them to some of these larger issues that need to be healed within families, within cultures, and then the greater consciousness. So it's very personal to me, and I've made it my mission to really blow the whistle on some of these really damaging messages that we receive, especially within religion. So,
absolutely, what a gift! What a gift! Your sister's life, on her coming into this world the way she did, and even leaving the world the way she did, has been such a gift of love, also, that has been awakening, probably at the core of your work, that is benefiting so many right now and will just continue unfolding. You have such a big mission, and so much needed. More power to you, Cherie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Valerie. This was just a lovely and enlightening and powerful discussion. And we will be definitely in touch. Definitely be in touch. You and I have a lot of similar work in the world. So I'm sure we'll be collaborating in the future.
Yes.
I like how Dr. Valerie talked about how trauma is just simply when we disconnect from parts of ourselves, go unconscious, things that happen to us, things we wouldn't choose, things we weren't even maybe a part of, things we're carrying ancestrally in our DNA, encoded into our very cells. We all have to stick together. We got to fight together. Women have been oppressed for thousands of years. It's genetically transmitted, and religion does play a part of that. It's time that we start to speak out, not just in our churches, but in all of the establishments, because they are going to start to come down. And you might be part of that. When I say come down, I don't mean like burn it down. I don't mean like in a mean way. Just, hey, this is a new time. There's a new way of doing things. There's a new way of being. There's a new way of leading. So there's the collective, there's the ancestral, and then there's the personal. So knowing that there is hope, we aren't alone, and knowing that we have the support and the validation now, that we don't have to tax our nervous systems and go into fight or flight and have all this PTSD/PSD symptomology. It's just like a new frontier in women's empowerment to heal from our trauma. And I am so convicted about this. I've been prepared for this my whole life. I've been absolutely obsessed with cracking the code on emotional trauma and depression and anxiety. And remember, trauma is anything that makes us feel unsafe, that leaves a mark on our body and creates disconnection from other parts of ourselves. So let's anchor in community together. Remember to join the Women Seeking Wholeness Facebook group. There's a Facebook page and there's a Facebook group. Join the group and the page, but the group is a little bit more intimate because we do go live and we are going to be tackling some of these tougher issues so that we can rise together and ascend together in this really exciting time to be on the earth. Have a beautiful week.